Tonight on Reporting Scotland, concerns about the cost of the inquiry into the Edinburgh Trams fiasco. It stands at £3.7 million.
I think it's wrong that we should have to pay this much for an inquiry that should have been paid for by the people that cost us this much money.
Why? I mean, it's like school. Is somebody going to get the cane or something? No, I don't think so.
The Scottish Government says the inquiry is committed to delivering a fair and balanced report. Also in the programme, a month on from the EU referendum, the UK's top law officer says Scotland will have no veto on Brexit, despite voting to remain.
I'm at a science lab in Edinburgh to find out what Brexit could mean for Scottish business.
Investigations continue into how a nuclear-powered submarine collided with a ship off the coast of Gibraltar. And Brendan Rodgers is looking to strengthen his squad after Celtic beat the part-time footballers of Gibraltar to continue their European campaign. Good evening. BBC Scotland has learned that the cost of the inquiry into the Edinburgh Trams fiasco is already more than £3.7 million. The Scottish Government set it up 2 years ago to look into why the project came in late and at more than double its original budget. Our reporter Cameron Buttle is in Edinburgh for us tonight. Cameron.
Well, the Edinburgh Trams have been running for about 2 years now, and they seem to be proving quite popular because passenger numbers are higher than expected. The line runs out from Edinburgh Airport down to here in the city centre. The cost? £776 million. It was 5 years overdue, and the line didn't go as far as it was meant to. Swift and thorough, that was the aim when the tram inquiry was launched back in June 2014. It is said to be making good progress, already collating more than 6 million documents. A Freedom of Information request from the BBC to the Scottish Government shows that the costs have already exceeded £3.7 million. That includes £1.8 million on staffing costs and £716,000 on legal fees. Out on the streets of the city, another multi-million-pound headline involving the trams doesn't seem to be going down well.
These inquiries cost there, don't they? Well, I'm not too enamoured with that.
I think it's wrong that we should have to pay this much for an inquiry that should have been paid for by the people that cost us this much money, as far as I'm concerned.
Why? I mean, it's like school. Is somebody going to get the cane or something? No, I don't think so. You just get moved on.
But some transport experts say there has to be an inquiry into such an expensive and controversial project, and it will be worth it.
And we need to understand the reasons why that happened so that we can then inform the design planning of tram schemes and other major transport infrastructure schemes in the future, and therefore hopefully save ourselves money in the future. And that's why we shouldn't necessarily be too concerned about the cost of this inquiry, because when we compare the cost of the inquiry to the potential savings from applying its findings to future schemes, then we could save ourselves a lot of money, and that's why it's valuable.
A spokesman for the inquiry said that Scottish ministers have been clear from the start that it should be timely and cost-effective. The Scottish Government said the inquiry team is committed to delivering a fair and balanced report with clear recommendations for future projects. There's no official end to the inquiry. A spokeswoman told us that it was actually open-ended. But I spoke to one local politician today, and he joked that I hope it doesn't go on for too long, because what we don't want is an inquiry into the inquiry.
Thank you very much. Cameron Buttle there in Edinburgh. A holiday park operator has been fined nearly £250,000 after a schoolboy died in a swimming pool in Arbroath. 6-year-old Aidan Sands died from brain injuries following the accident at the Red Lion Caravan Park in June 2011. Lough Erne Caravan Parks Limited admitted a number of health and safety charges at Forfar Sheriff Court. A woman's body has been recovered after a car plunged into the River Clyde at Renfrew this afternoon. It happened next to the Braehead shopping centre just after 1 o'clock. Witnesses said they saw the car speeding along a road near the centre. It hit 2 cars before crashing through a metal fence into the river. A big search and rescue operation was organised involving the Coast Guard helicopter and police divers. A post-mortem will be carried out. The UK government's senior law officer has ruled out a veto for Scotland over when the Brexit process is started. The Attorney-General, Jeremy Wright, said there would be consultations with the Scottish government, but that it would not be able to block the process. Here's our Westminster correspondent, David Porter.
A month ago today, we were voting on whether to stay in the EU. Scotland voted overwhelmingly to remain, but the UK as a whole decided to leave. That set about quite a train of events. A Prime Minister has resigned. A new occupant has moved into Downing Street. The Labour leader is fighting for his survival, and the First Minister has indicated a second independence referendum is now, in her words, highly likely. 4 weeks on, and minds are turning to how Brexit will work and what role Scotland will have.
Closing day. Thank you. The Prime Minister has stated that Brexit means Brexit, and the First Minister of Scotland has stated that for us, Remain remains Remain. Do you agree that the Scottish people have spoken and therefore their sovereignty should be respected?
The Prime Minister has indicated that they shall not trigger Article 50 in the UK until there is a UK approach to Brexit. Does the Right Honourable and Learned Gentleman agree that a legislative consent motion is required before the Government has the legal authority to trigger Article 50?
All parts of the United Kingdom, including the governments of the devolved administrations, should be able to participate in the process of developing the United Kingdom's approach to these negotiations. But that does not mean that any of the parts of the United Kingdom have a veto over this process, and so consultation most certainly, but veto I'm afraid not.
But from an English Eurosceptic Conservative, this.
I'm quite happy with the government consulting with the devolved administrations, but what concerns me is that we don't finish up being held to ransom by the Scottish nationalists.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the Prime Minister has been very clear that the United Kingdom will leave the European Union, and that means all of the United Kingdom.
As MPs pack their bags and head for their summer break, they know one thing is almost certain. Whatever else may happen, when they get back, the Brexit question is likely to dominate all other issues. David Porter, reporting Scotland, Westminster.
You're watching Reporting Scotland from the BBC, still to come on tonight's programme. What could leaving the EU mean for Scottish businesses? We'll be live from Edinburgh.
And coming up in sport, after seeing off the Red Imps, Celtic now face a Champions League 6,000-mile round trip. And closer to home, some crazy golf required at Carnoustie as the Senior Open Championship gets underway.
The Royal Navy is investigating how a Faslane-based nuclear-powered submarine collided with a civilian boat off the coast of Gibraltar. HMS Ambush has now been taken into port to be checked. Although not a Trident submarine, the SNP say the crash was far too close a shave. Here's our correspondent, Andrew Kerr.
Limping back into port, HMS Ambush with significant damage. The Faslane-based boat is now being assessed for repairs. It struck a merchant vessel off the coast of Gibraltar. One defence analyst says it may have been trying to hide as part of an exercise.
One suspects that she might have been a little bit too clever, perhaps. Perhaps she was using a relatively noisy tanker as cover and got a bit too close. Perhaps she misjudged the draft of the tanker because it was apparently a bunkering tanker and these go up and down. And if she did, then she made a significant error.
A retired submariner has some sympathy with the crew.
You could stand underneath the Ford Road Bridge and listen to all that noise of all these vehicles going across all the time. Lots of them, just dum, 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 dum. That noise that's what you hear in the Gibraltar Strait. There's just constantly stop-start, stop-start. Because you've got fishing vessels in the region, you've got them big draft tankers coming through, and lots of them. You never get a minute to just go and stop.
It's the latest incident involving an Astute-class submarine. One ran aground off Skye in 2010. This type do not carry Trident nuclear weapons, but they do have nuclear reactors. The Royal Navy say there was no threat to the reactor, but the SNP have expressed concern.
I think that the MOD really do have some explaining to do as to exactly how this happened, and it just calls into question the overall safety aspect.
The MOD don't yet know if the submarine will be repaired here at its home base on the Clyde or elsewhere. What we do know is that this has been an embarrassing incident for the Royal Navy, a service which normally prides itself on stealth and seamanship. Andrew Kerr, reporting Scotland, Faslane.
Unions insist there'll be no redundancies as a result of uncertainty over the timetable to build 8 Type 26 frigates on the Clyde. It comes after the Chief Executive for Equipment at the Ministry of Defence told a Commons committee there was no start date for building the fleet. The SNP said that meant the project was delayed indefinitely. However, the Unite union said the contract was still guaranteed. 3 people who died after a disturbance in Aberdeen on Tuesday night have been named. Police believe 40-year-old Tracy Gabriel and 43-year-old Keith Taylor were murdered by Hugh Gallagher, who was 57. He plunged to his death from the 12th floor balcony after police arrived on the scene at Donside Court. Tracy Gabriel's family described her as a very caring person. Yesterday, economic data revealed that the Scottish economy is stagnating and growing at less than half the pace of the UK. Much of that is down to the impact of the downturn in the oil industry. But what sort of threat will Brexit pose to Scottish business? Our correspondent David Henderson joins us now from Edinburgh. David.
Yes, Sally, 4 weeks on from the EU referendum, what comes next is still very unclear, and that really matters to firms like this one, Roslin Cell Therapies, which supply companies right around the world. And of course, Scottish firms do billions of pounds worth of trade right across Europe, and they want to make sure that those links remain unaffected if and when the UK leaves the European Union. I've been hearing from the boss of a shortbread factory in Aberdeenshire to find out more.
Duncan, I'm Business Development Manager at Duncan's of Deeside Limited. We've been around for 30 years and the business was originally established by my grandmother, Elizabeth Duncan. We proudly produce hand-baked shortbread and oatcakes, all made to traditional family recipes. Our most famous one, what we're most known for, would be our all-butter shortbread. We can produce anywhere up to 15,000 of those an hour, thanks to this new production facilities that we have and the expansion of our warehouse.
Small beginnings, but this is a big productive output now.
Oh, definitely. We're growing very quick and rapidly, and it's an exciting time for the business.
How important are European countries, particularly countries in the EU, for you and your business?
We export to Spain, Germany, France, Italy, and further afield to Australia, America. We do a lot of private label as well as dealing with the likes of Morrisons and Tesco in the UK. Just now it's an uncertain time. A lot of people are asking questions and no one seems to know the answers, unfortunately. Our butter, sugar, margarine, all our fats, everything that's super key important ingredients into the products which we use are sadly all increasing in price just now.
Whether or not we're in the European Union, you'll want that single market to continue.
Oh, 100%, without a shadow of a doubt. We need it to continue as a business. We would have to adapt and change, as we've done in the past, but for us to maintain our growth at such a healthy way, we need that market to remain open.
Paul Duncan there, and my apologies for the hairnet that I had to wear there. Well, I'm joined now by Janet Downey, who's Chief Executive of Roslin Cell Therapies, and by Philip Milne, a partner at the global accountancy firm EY. Janet, thanks very much for allowing us in your laboratory here. What then could the vote to leave the EU do for your business? What would be the impact?
I think at this stage we've not seen a massive impact. The downturn in the pound has had some benefits, but longer term I think we're looking to see what the opportunities there will be for us in terms of immigration and also in terms of the regulatory landscape that we work within and making sure that we maintain that.
When you say regulatory landscape, you're talking about cross-border regulation, a level playing field right across Europe.
So Roslin Cell Therapies, we manufacture cells for clinical trials and we work with companies across Europe and the US to make sure that we manufacture their cells in a safe manner. And we have to work within that regulatory landscape at the moment, which is European. And for us, it's complying with that, still having access to Europe, but making the benefits within the UK and having a positive impact for us.
So you don't want any more red tape there. Well, one of the themes of the referendum campaign was that leaving the EU would cut immigration. What sort of impact does that have?
For us, immigration is an important point for us. We want to attract highly skilled people here to Edinburgh, and for us it's important that we get the right people and we have the immigration landscape for that, and we can attract those highly skilled people.
And some of your staff come from Europe right now?
Yes, we have about 5% of our staff from Europe, and we want to make sure they can stay.
OK. Philip Milne, Edinburgh, of course, is one of Europe's leading financial centres. As we look towards Brexit, what's at stake for the city and for Scotland?
Well, Janet's story is no different to what we're hearing from businesses that we work with across Scotland. We're in a period of radical uncertainty, an intense period, and we all need to work through that. We should remember that you know, the UK is still open for business. It's an agile and competitive economy, and we should take confidence in that. When you look at Brexit, it's not Brexit itself, but it's how we respond to Brexit.
Yeah, I mean, we know that companies are mobile. They can move. Some may threaten to move. Some may look to move if we're left out of the European single market. Is there a risk of that happening with some of the firms based in Edinburgh?
I think what I would encourage is not to base decisions on speculation. There's a lot of speculation and there's a lot of if, buts and maybes. So what we need to do is work through policy as it develops and assess the implications. Be resilient and be agile, but be well informed as to what policy means for your sector and for the economy.
Yeah, I mean, Janet, as we look forward, you know, Theresa May, the new Prime Minister, is just getting into the job. If you've got a clear message for her about what she should be doing, what she needs to do, what would it be?
I mean, I think make sure that Scotland and the UK is the place to come for business, particularly for cell therapies. But for us, it's not just about what the government can do. We want to get investment into our business, so we're looking more broadly than just the government.
There we must leave it. Janet, Philip, thank you both very much indeed. So, a lot at stake then here in Scotland and across the UK when it comes to Brexit. As you heard there, the UK government is going to face very intense calls to make sure that if we exit the EU, it doesn't harm trade. Sally,
Thanks
back
very
to you.
much. Thanks very much, David, and we did all love the hairnet. Now, a look at other stories from across the country. A man has admitted killing his baby son at his home in East Kilbride. David Sinclair, who's 34, inflicted injuries so severe on 5-month-old Joshua that the child died in hospital hours later. Sinclair pled guilty to culpable homicide at the High Court in Glasgow. The Glasgow subway modernisation works will not be completed on time. SPT said the contractor, Colas Rail, would need extra time to complete the project. The subway was suspended from the 2nd of July, and it's estimated the work may not be complete until the middle of August. Police in Edinburgh have released CCTV images of a woman whom officers want to trace in connection with an alleged hate crime on a bus. In it, a woman and her children were subjected to xenophobic comments. The incident happened on the 9th of May on board the number 10 Lothian bus in Leith. Swedish energy company Vattenfall now has a 100% stake in a planned multi-million-pound wind farm off the coast of Aberdeen. The £300 million project has been marred with legal problems, with the US presidential nominee Donald Trump objecting to the plans on the grounds that they would ruin the view from his golf course. Floral tributes from fans of Robert Burns have been installed in the shadow of the Burns Monument in Alloway to mark the 220th anniversary of the bard's death. Supporters of Burns from around the world have sent messages which are engraved on metal red roses, the flower that's the subject of one of Burns's most famous works. Some homes in Orkney are to benefit from a new smart control energy system linking them to renewable energy generated by local wind turbines. Around 100 households in 3 islands are set to trial the system. Hundreds of whale watchers in Lerwick were treated to a very close encounter with a pod of orcas earlier today. Around 10 of them worked their way along the shore before briefly entering the harbour. There have been many sightings of whales around Shetland's coast during the past 2 weeks. Now let's get the latest sport. Here's Jonathan.
Sally, thank you very much. Good evening. The Celtic manager, Brendan Rodgers, is hoping to strengthen his squad ahead of the Champions League qualifier against Astana next week. Victory over Lincoln Red Imps last night means the Scottish champions are into the third round, and despite the prospect of a tricky trek east, there is plenty of confidence. Here's our senior football reporter, Chris McLaughlin.
After seeing off the champions of Gibraltar last night, Celtic were promoting a match against the champions of England, a weekend friendly following a midweek mauling. It took 20 minutes for the Lincoln back line to be breached though, Mikael Lustig the man to settle the nerves. That was followed shortly afterwards by this, Lee Griffiths doing what he does best, the Imps fairy tale fading fast. And after Patrick Roberts danced, jinked and dinked his way down the right-hand side, it was game and tie over. And so a 6-hour flight to Kazakhstan awaits next week. At the end of it, a side who will fancy their chances.
This team are good. You know, they've been in the Champions League last season. I think they got points off Atletico Madrid, Benfica, Galatasaray at home, so we know the challenge, but there's no excuses for us. We know we're a big team, we've got to do a big job, so we're looking forward to it.
The shock of Gibraltar all but forgotten. It's onwards and eastwards in the push for progression.
So Celtic are safely through in the Champions League. 3 other Scottish sides are in European action today, hoping to make progress in the Europa League qualifiers. In fact, one of those sides has already played their match. Hearts also in action this evening at Tynecastle. And there for us tonight is our reporter, Brian McLaughlin.
Yes, good evening, Jonathan, from a sun-kissed Tynecastle where around 15,000 fans are expected here to watch Hearts take on the Maltese Minnows of Birkirkar 0-0 after last week's first leg in Valletta. Some team news quickly for Heart and Midlothian. Sam Nicholson is back into the starting 11 for the injured Perry Kitchen. But as you say, one Scottish team has already been in action this afternoon. Aberdeen travelled to Latvia to take on Ventspils, 3-0 up from the first leg at Pittodrie. And of course, one goal this afternoon secured another victory for Derek McInnes' side. It was top goal scorer from last season, Adam Rooney, scoring with just 12 minutes left for play. A 4-0 aggregate then for Aberdeen. They now await the winners of Maribor and Levski Sofia, who play later on this evening. The other Scottish club in action, kick-off 7 o'clock in Copenhagen, where Hibernian take on Brøndby. Arguably the biggest task of all the Scottish clubs. 1-0 down after last week's defeat at Easter Road. They lost a goal after just 15 seconds. But wouldn't it be terrific, Jonathan, if Hearts and Hibernian could join Aberdeen in the third qualifying round of the Europa League next week?
Brian, thank you very much indeed. There's live coverage of the action tonight on BBC Radio Scotland. The Sports Sound team are on the air now. Now, after just a year in the job, Brian McClare has stepped down as the SFA's performance director. The former Celtic and Manchester United forward was tasked with developing a strategy for the future of the game. But it's understood he'd become increasingly frustrated at the amount of time he was spending in boardrooms. The BBC understands the SFA will now reassess the role before appointing his successor. Golf Senior Open Championship is underway at Carnoustie, with some of the most famous names in the game taking part. And quite a trio teed off early this afternoon. Scotland's Colin Montgomerie playing alongside 8-times major winner Tom Watson and the ever-colourful John Daly.
Few players can carry off trousers like this. But when you're John Daly and the birdies keep coming, nobody's too worried about dress code. The Wild Thing won 2 majors in his pomp, up and down at Carnoustie today, but always colourful. Even golfing greats like Tom Watson can get stuck in a rut. The trick is knowing how to get out of it. The rut extending to the green as the 66-year-old hit 5 bogeys on the first 9. And what of Scotland's Colin Montgomerie? Not exactly rolling in clover after his exertions at the Open in Troon last weekend. 3 bogeys before his first birdie at the 12th. Household names everywhere. Relative youngster Miguel Angel Jimenez with one eye on the seniors title. He finished 2 under par. 58-year-old Bernard Langer, almost pin perfect, finished 1 under. A number of players, including Paraguay's Carlos Franco, sharing an early lead of 3 under par.
Beautiful day in Carnoustie, and that's how the sport looks tonight, Sally.
Thanks very much indeed, Jonathan. Well, let's see what surprises the weather's planning for us, Christine. There's bound to be a few.
Not many, I hope, Sally, after the last couple of days. Thank you. Good evening to you. Yes, we've had some fairly extreme weather over the last couple of days. Today, though, provided us with some fairly pleasant, settled, summery conditions. And as ever, our weather watchers have been sending us some fantastic images. This taken earlier today in Machrihanish, in Argyll and Bute. It's also been a fine day of weather in St Andrews in Fife. And this positively tropical image which came into us from Minnie the cat taken in the Isle of Harris in the Western Isles. So for this evening and tonight, however, we will continue to see cloud increasing. Some fine spells of sunshine in the east. However, this weather front already making inroads across western Scotland, and that continues to track its way north-eastwards during tonight. Some fairly heavy pulses of rain to come across the West Highlands, the Argyll area, and perhaps Dumfries and Galloway. The far northeast and Shetland holding on to the driest, clearest conditions tonight. Temperatures here around 9 or 10 Celsius. Widely, though, around 13 to 16 degrees, so a fairly muggy and humid night to come once again. Into tomorrow, it dawns on a fairly cloudy note with further outbreaks of rain. However, an improving picture for most of us during the day. That improvement coming in fairly quickly across western Scotland, the rain gradually clearing away to the east come the afternoon. A legacy of cloud, though, across some eastern areas tomorrow afternoon. Just 1 or 2 sharp showers, too, across the likes of East Lothian, the Borders, perhaps the Angus area and Aberdeenshire, too. For the most part, though, come tomorrow afternoon, we should see some brightness, some sunshine developing, and with light winds and highs of around 20, if not 21 Celsius, it will feel pleasantly warm once again. Into the evening, we should see any remaining showers clearing away into the North Sea to leave fine conditions for most of us with some spells of brightness and sunshine. Into Saturday, we start the day with a lot of dry weather. However, cloud quickly increasing from the west, and this next batch of rain crossing the country, becoming lighter and patchier in the east during the day. Again, with any brightness or sunshine, temperatures will peak around 20 or 21 Celsius. And at this stage for Sunday, it looks like some showers or longer spells of rain, spells of sunshine, and warm in the sunshine. That's the forecast. Sally.
Thanks very much, Kirsty. I'm still drooling over that light in Harris.
Indeed, beautiful.
Here are the main headlines. BBC Scotland has learned that the cost of the inquiry into the Edinburgh Trams fiasco is already more than £3.7 million. The Scottish Government set it up 2 years ago to look into why the project came in late and at more than double its original budget. A manhunt's underway for 2 men of Middle Eastern appearance who attempted to abduct a serviceman out jogging near his airbase. That's RAF Marham in Norfolk. He was approached by the men, one of whom tried to grab him, but he was able to fight him off and run away. The police say that while the motive for the attack remains unclear, they can't rule out terrorism. RAF Marham is home to the UK's Tornado fighter jets. And that's Reporting Scotland. I'll be back with the headlines at 8 and the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. Until then, from everyone on the team right across the country, have a very good evening. Bye-bye.